so much for joining us today. It's so good to see so many of you here. Sorry that Simone can't be here today. She's had a little family emergency, so you have me instead. Obviously, today is all about the Netflix Documentary Talent Fund. We're running loads of these kind of things of different industry leaders over the next few months. So, like, stay up to date because we've got a masterclass with Idris Elba's company, 22 Summers. We've got like a money masterclass, how to like get the best as a freelancer, and like a lot more community and industry support led sessions and masterclasses. So today we're joined with Georgie, who is the supervising producer of the fund and also a Breakthrough Leader alum. And she's going to talk all through about how it works, what they're looking for, and how to get involved. So without further ado, let me bring her to the stage and I can get off this. There we go, Georgie.
Hello everyone.
Guys, let us know in the Q&As if you have any questions. On the right, you'll have like a bar with a chat function or a Q&A function. If you want to ask a question, just go to the Q&A one, type it on, we can get it up on the screen and then maybe even get you on screen too so that Georgie and I aren't alone up here. But how is everyone doing today? Let me know in the chat. Can you see it on the right? Yeah. Okay, well, Georgie, do you want to start a little bit about the fund before we get some questions through by people? Oh, we've got, hi, doing well so far. Oh, lovely, loads of people. All good, thank you. Great. Nice to meet you guys. Nice to meet you too. Excited to hear. I'm excited to hear as well.
Yes, well, thank you, everyone. So many people here. It's so great. So I'm one of the supervising producers of the Netflix Documentary Talent Fund. I'm also a doc filmmaker for my sins outside of that. This is our 4th year running it. We've supported 21 filmmakers so far. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have already looked on the website and have a rough idea of what the fund is, but I'll just go through it all very quickly again. So there are 5 funds of £30,000 up for grabs. It's open to anyone who lives, resides, has the right to work in the UK and Ireland. And we are looking for films that are between 8 to 12 minutes. And we're really looking for people who are committed to working in the documentary space, who want to carve out a career, who can use this opportunity as a springboard to take the next step. Everyone selected will be under the guidance of Netflix and other filmmaking professionals that are connected to the scheme. And we will be selecting, like I said, 5 in total. This year, the brief for the fund is change. So pretty broad, I think, open to interpretation for sure. And we tend to try and give the filmmakers a lot of creative freedom. And we're really keen to see what people come up with. The applications are obviously open at the moment. They close on the 12th of February at 1 p.m. And the application process is pretty simple in its first round, kind of by design. I think we've all probably had a lot of experience of having to fill out funding applications where you feel like you have to take 2 weeks off of work just to fill it out. So the first stage is pretty short intentionally. So you just have to submit a logline, a short synopsis, and then a creative statement about your idea, as well as any sort of details about teams you might have, like team members you might have in place, as well as sort of your previous experience. And then from that initial submission process, we then longlist a number of filmmakers, at which point we'll ask you for more information on your idea, and that might be budget. We might ask you to submit a video, visual materials, things like that. And then from that long list, we then shortlist between 10 to 15 filmmakers to then come into Netflix and pitch live in front of the Netflix documentary team execs, as well as a panel of professionals from the industry who make up our judging panel. And then, yeah, from that, 5 people get selected, and then sort of away you go, essentially. We sort of support the filmmakers along that whole journey. So my role is sort of a bit of a mishmash of producer, EP, but also kind of pastoral mentorship care. So for context, I got my first ever film funded through a very, very similar scheme, which is why I work on this scheme. So I've kind of been through the process, and my role is also partly sort of shepherd everyone through the madness. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any and all questions. So
What's
fire
worked
away.
well in the past? Like, what kind of things have you been like has drawn your eyes for like past people who have got the fund and stuff?
I mean, we've funded such a huge variety of uh, films and filmmakers. I would also strongly recommend you can watch all of the finished films on Netflix's YouTube channel. So I would really, really recommend going and watching as many of them as you can. I think the films that tend to do really well are ones that have, this might sound obvious, but are very story first and very character driven. I think that maybe one of the pitfalls that we often see is that people pitch topics or issues or themes, but they're not really pitching us a story in a film. So it might be, for example, one year we had a lot of pitches about like cold water swimming for some reason. I don't know why that year was everyone wanted to pitch that. But some of the pitches were kind of just that I want to make a documentary about the rise of cold water swimming. But that doesn't really tell us what we're going to see. What is the story? What is the narrative drive? Who are the characters? So we're looking for films that have a lot of drive to them and are very, very character focused. I would say in this initial application stage, don't underestimate how important your logline is. We get a insane amount of applications, and so it's really important that your logline sort of stands out amongst the hundreds, if not thousands, of applications that we get. So in some ways, it is finding what is the snappiest, hookiest version of your log line that's going to stick in our head, so that as we're going through the process, we're always thinking back to that log line we read. Um, yeah.
We
Oh,
have
this
a
is a
question
question.
here. Do stories have to be UK, IE based?
Not technically, no. It's pretty open. But what I will say is that there is an expectation that is achievable on the budget. So you have 30 grand, and that is to cover everything. We also have an expectation that you pay people properly. So it's whether if you are going to pitch a project from outside of the UK, we'd probably want to probe, like, have you really thought through like the budget constraints? Is it really feasible? There's also quite a specific timeline in which the films need to be delivered by, I think it's January. So the people who get the fund will be announced in July, and you have to deliver the film by January. So it's also about, can you realistically shoot and go through post in that time period? So yeah, I think if you are going to pitch something that's taking place outside of the UK, just bear that in mind and maybe try and indicate in your application that you've thought those things through. And if you haven't thought them through, think them through.
We've got another question from Richard, who says, can we submit more than one idea in the first instance?
No, unfortunately, it is one submission per applicant. So I would say put your best foot forward.
We've got another one. What stage in the film career do you need to be in?
I would say it's pretty broad. I mean, we say that it's a scheme for emerging talent. So probably if you're completely new and green to the industry, this probably isn't the right fund for you, because as I said, we're quite hands off in the sense that we kind of let the filmmakers do what they want to do. But on the flip side, it means that they need to be able to sort of pull off what they're saying they can. But having said that, we've had quite a broad range of filmmakers, some who are already working directors, some who are maybe further back in their career, but clearly have demonstrated that they're committed to working in the documentary space. What we really want is to back people who want to be in this space and don't just want to make one film, as it were. And I would say if you are maybe a slightly greener director, you might think about who could your producing partner be. Maybe you want to find a slightly more experienced producer who can sort of be a strong guiding hand for that process. But we're pretty broad, and honestly, if the story excites us enough, we'll also try and help support the filmmakers if they need more support than others.
Did you have anything else to say about that? Sorry, yeah, this was where the question came from. Did you want to speak more about the level you're at? Maybe we can see if that's right for this fund.
Oh, do I have the floor?
Yeah, you've got
So
the
excited.
floor.
Yeah, hi. So the level I'm at, I've worked in media for a long time,
Mhm,
but I'm one of those people that I've been a journalist, doing production. I've also worked in a business corporate function, but I
mhm,
directed my first short film, Ugly Afro Hair, sorry for the plug, last year, with a filmmaker, Danny St. Clair.
mhm.
So it was my first feature, but I've had experience, but not in the sort of formal working for a big studio sense. So I wanted to know if you were sort of the traditional filmmakers that have had experience in the traditional sense, or someone who's a bit rugged, but clearly has sort of natural ability to develop something special. So that was
Yeah.
kind of where my question came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're not expecting, yeah, there's no sort of rules around you have to have had X amount of broadcast credits or anything like that at all. We've
Right.
had a real mix of people, some people who work more in the indie space, some people like
Mm.
yourself who are a bit of, doing a bit of a mishmash of different things. To be honest, I'm a bit like that. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. We've also, one of our previous filmmakers works as an editor, but he'd never had the opportunity to direct, but we felt like
Mm.
he was impressive enough that we wanted to give him that opportunity to take that step up. So I think for us, it just comes down to, is the story strong, and does the applicant demonstrate like a genuine desire to work in the documentary space? And
Yeah.
that's really the two main things.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Yeah, we've got another question here. What advice do you have for the creative statement?
So creative statement, I think it's a good opportunity for you to just touch on the things that potentially make you unique. So, uh, is there a particular reason why you're the right filmmaker to tell this story? Is there a particular reason you want to make this film now? Or some people like to talk about the team that they have in place. If you have, for example, regular collaborators like DOPs or editors that you want to bring on board, it's great in the creative statement to indicate that too, so we can have a better idea of like what the whole project might look like. There's also opportunity to submit some links. So if you have previous work that you want to show us, you can do that there too. I would say with submitting links, I would say fewer is better. Don't dump tons and tons of links because it's just very hard for us to get through. And actually, what you want to do is maybe put in one or two things that are really going to make you stand out. Um, but it's just anything outside of the literal narrative itself that you think is worth us knowing, is really the key thing. And that creative statement is the opportunity to talk about you as the individual filmmaker rather than the film itself.
I always want to say, if you want to explain your Q&A a bit further, you can request, like raise your hand and that request will come to me and I can hand you the mic. Someone that's already done that is Maria. So I'm going to hand her the mic to speak on an issue now. Hi,
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Maria. Good.
Thank you for having us. Yes, my question is related to the editorial control. I just wanted to know how much Netflix is involved into this process and how about the rights and contract at the end of the deliverable.
So in terms of sort of editorial, ultimately we want you guys to make the film that you pitch. So we're relatively hands off. There isn't a lot of like micromanaging from Netflix. What will usually happen is once you get to post, kind of similar to I guess a lot of projects, you'll have several rounds of notes that Netflix execs will give to you. They'll watch your cuts and feedback to you, but ultimately it's your film and we're very much led by you. So it's more of a case of them helping you improve the version of the film you want to make. We're always there, myself and Libby, who's who's the lead producer. We're kind of there on a more day-to-day basis to sound out creative ideas and stuff like that. And then the Netflix execs are there to give you sort of the bigger picture notes. But we are pretty hands off when it comes to the creative. And then in terms of the rights and all of that, I'm not going to talk too much on it because I don't have the contract right in front of me, and it shifts year to year. But generally, you have a lot of the film still belongs to you. You're licensing it to Netflix. You're still able to submit it into film festivals and things like that. But obviously, the end film will go on Netflix's YouTube. That's sort of the deal, essentially. But yeah, you're sort of free to take it to whatever festivals you want.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Temi.
No
That's all.
worries.
We've got another question from Becky. Hi, Becky. Ooh, are you with us?
Hi, can you see me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me. That's great. I was just going to say, are we as production companies able to put something through, or should it be direct pitches from the directors themselves?
So there needs to be a lead applicant. So that's usually the director or sometimes the producer. We are awarding a filmmaker a fund, as it were. But equally, there is an expectation that in order to receive the funds, you have to have a limited company. So it can still be a production through your company. You would just need to nominate someone from your company to be the lead applicant. And that also then comes with the sort of announcements about who the filmmaker who's been awarded will be that named applicant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it makes sense that it wouldn't be the producer that was the lead applicant, that it would be the director.
Yeah, usually, I mean, to be honest, if you're a producing directing duo, then I think even if there's a singular lead applicant, if you indicate in your application that there's a sort of producer director partnership, we tend to sort of try and platform them together as well, because we understand that like that's a very close working relationship. But yeah, usually it is the director that's sort of the main applicant.
Great, awesome, thank you.
We've got another question here. What advice do you have for the creative statement? Oh, we already
answered this one. Yeah.
How about this? Can you do a joint submission with a co-producer director? We've just had this. Or would you recommend splitting the roles?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if there's a reason why you want to co-direct, we're certainly open to it, but we would just need to understand why that was the case, essentially.
Other than avoid pitching topics, what are some others don'ts that we should avoid?
Very good question. I think actually the main big one is that we are looking to commission documentaries that are 8 to 12 minutes in their entirety. This is not a fund for proof of concept, essentially. It should feel like a story that we get a satisfying conclusion within the 8 to 12 minutes that really feel like they fit the format of short film. And I've done a lot of short films, and I also work in like longer formats, but I really believe that short form storytelling is an art form in and of itself. But I think a mistake sometimes we do see is people pitching projects where they clearly want to take it to feature. And this is not really the fund for that. Netflix are looking to commission an original film that fits in this format. So I think that's the really, really big one that we see a lot of. People make a lot of mistakes in that sense.
Is there a slant you're looking for on current affairs stories?
No, not particularly. Like I said, there is the theme is the theme, and I mean, I guess sort of relating back to the previous question, it's always helpful, even if it feels very obvious in your synopsis or creative statement, to just indicate like why your film relates to the theme. But when it comes to current affairs, not massively. I think, there's definitely a sense of like wanting films that maybe feel slightly more hopeful. I think that's probably just a product of the absolute dumpster fire of a world we live in right now. I guess the only thing is, again, there is a set time frame in which the films have to be made and delivered. So if it is going to be something more current affairs or that's unfolding live, we'd have to be convinced that we could get a satisfactory conclusion to the film by the time the films have to be delivered.
Perfect. Hi.
Hey, hey. I was just wondering, what about sort of presenter, like celebrity-led type films. And, you know, like a lot of Channel 4 and BBC, they're doing these kind of hybrid formats where it's hard-hitting stories, but told in an incredibly engaging, factual, you know, sometimes crime, etc. sort of way. Is that something you'd be open to, having like a presenter-led piece and hybrid kind of format?
Yeah, I think there's yeah, absolutely no reason that you couldn't pitch something like that. Again, and I think this might also relate to a question I saw, sorry, pop up somewhere, is that the only thing is, again, I know I keep saying about this, the timeline that we have. So we also have to know that you've secured the access and you can actually pull it off in the time frame. So I think, especially if you're gonna pitch something that's either presenter-led or especially if it's celebrity-led, indicate in your application, even if it's one sentence saying access is secured or access negotiations are underway, just so that we know it's actually feasible.
Yeah. So ideally, you want sort of stories that aren't in their development stage, but much more fleshed out, and you've got some form of, you know, access potentially.
Ultimately, I think it's just the reality of the timeline is like once you get funded, you basically are expected to go straight into pre-production, you know, you've only got a few months to deliver the film. So we just have to be confident at the point of funding that the film is ready to go to that point. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay. What development stage is ideal for this fund? I guess you just touched on it, but can we have begun shooting while the application process is ongoing?
So it's a bit of a blurry line. Ultimately, it's not a finishing fund. I guess that's the way to put it. Like the expectation is the majority of production takes place within the timeline of the fund. But having said that, you know, I understand with docs, you may have already done some initial filming, or you might have started doing some filming to cut together a sizzle. So it's not a hard no, but it's not a fund for you to finish filming if you've actually pretty much shot the majority of the film. So yeah, I think it's you sort of use your common sense on that. It's not, you know, we're not going to be hardlined if you've shot a little bit with them, but if it becomes clear that basically it's just paying for post or something like that, then that's going to be a pretty hard no. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. If you're fairly new to the industry but have a co-producer in mind for the team, can you share their links as you might not have any?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that creative statement, that's where you can talk about any other team members you have. So if you have a co-producer, and then yeah, definitely throw in some links to their previous work. That's a good shout.
Can you also act in it?
Well, it is a documentary fund. Some docs, and we've had in the past, have reconstructions and things like that. So there have been actors in it, but it is for documentary specifically, not scripted.
Is it mainly for production companies or can directors apply?
Oh, not at all. It's very much kind of director-led, I guess. It's about awarding sort of individual filmmakers or filmmaking teams. So I think, like I mentioned previously, there will be a lead applicant, even if it's coming from a production company. But you don't have to have a production company to apply. The only thing I would say is in order to receive the funds, you will need to have a limited company. So either you would be expected to set one up yourself, and then you would be responsible for all of the paperwork that comes with running a limited company, or what's usually the case is you find a producer that's already set up like that you can partner with.
Can you sign up as an independent, or would you need a producer to go through the whole pitching process?
You can definitely pitch on your own. We would expect you to attach a producer at some point, unless we're very, very confident that you can produce and direct. In our experience, it's a lot for someone to do. Part of this fund as well is that the expectation of how your production runs and how you go through this process is kind of like a mini experience of what it's like to work with Netflix. Generally, that's sort of the point. So we run boot camps that teach you about, you know, what it takes to deliver a production to Netflix standard, which is a great experience because you get to sort of learn that stuff with relatively low stakes. But it does mean that there's quite a lot of work that goes into it. So I would say at some point it would be good if you could attach a producer. If you don't feel like you have the contacts to find the right producer, and you get sort of longlisted or shortlisted, then myself or Libby will talk to you about it, and we might be able to try and find someone to pair you with. But yeah, I would strongly suggest people don't produce and direct their own film.
Hello. What is the biggest difference you see between shortlist applications and those that ultimately get funded?
That's a very good question. I think the ones that get funded are ones that have a very, very strong sense of story and character and have a kind of unique like creative style to them. And that doesn't need to be something that's like crazy with form or doing something super experimental, but I think the films that have a very, very clear vision of what they want their film to be tend to be the ones that do really, really well. And I know I keep hammering it home, but it really is like story and character first. That is pretty much the biggest thing. And as you go along the process, you'll sort of get interrogated on that more and more. The people who already have clearly thought through everything and have an answer and understand their characters and all of that. And I think that's also why it's really important, as much as possible, to have your access secured, so you've had time to have those conversations and really understand what it is that you're pitching us.
Great. What is the fund's policy on the use of AI in projects?
As far as I am aware, there is no I don't think there is a policy, to be honest. I don't think there's any issue with it. I would say if you're going to use AI, explain why, in what form, how does it benefit the project, what are you trying to achieve with it, things like that. I think we'd want to know. If it makes up a significant part of how you're going to present the project, whether that's creatively or what have you. But if you have specific questions on that, maybe email me later and I can find out from the Netflix team, because I don't know a huge amount, and I don't think we've ever had that question before.
This one's just come through. Can a few directors pitch with the same production company as their receiver?
Yes, technically yes, because the fund would be being awarded to the filmmaker. But what I will say is, if it's very clear that it's a very established production company that's just pitching tons and tons of project through filming, like, the people on the team know the industry well enough that we know pretty much the majority of the production companies. So it is a fund for filmmakers to make the film that they want, not for a production company to try and get their slate off the ground, if that makes sense. So I think it's fine if it's, you're all working through the same production company, but I think just be careful about how you then frame that, if that's going to be the case, so it doesn't, raise any eyebrows, as it were.
Is a documentary about something that happened in the past acceptable, i.e. not observational uses, archives?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. There's no rule that the docs have to be observational. In fact, one of our films last year, Too Discussing to Be Confused, was a very, very archive heavy film. So there's no restrictions when it comes to that.
Great. Does archive footage also need to be cleared of Netflix before use in addition to rights holder?
Yes, I think if I understand the question right. Yeah, they are like you would for any broadcast, the rights need to be cleared. And Netflix's own internal legal team will be across that with you to make sure everything is being cleared as it should be.
Are first-time directors eligible to apply with a seasoned producer?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no there's no hard and fast rule about that. I think for first-time directors, it would be good to know, what have you done previously? And it doesn't have to be directing. It's just like, what else have you been doing? Are you already working in the industry, but in a different capacity, maybe? And certainly if you are quite a green director, if you can come with a sort of strong producer in hand, that just makes us more confident that you can pull off what you're saying. But, like I said, we've, funded filmmakers who never directed anything or who are working in different parts of the industry. Like I said, we had an editor that stepped up to director, or people who are researchers or APs or things like that. So yeah, we're very open to it.
Could you share an example of a past initial pitch that really stood out and what makes it successful? And from a Netflix perspective, are there any key tips on what makes an 100-word synopsis truly stand out at the early stage?
Ooh, that's hard to do off the top of my head. I can talk a little bit about it. Maybe what I'll do is I'll go to the team and see if we can maybe pull an example to just share with people. But I think at the first initial stage, I think sometimes people get bogged down in wanting to try and communicate all of the nuance of their film, like all of the details of the story. And it becomes very heavy and very hard to fully understand in what is quite a short amount of text. So I would say the ones that do best are the ones that frame it in the way that is the most catchy, the most sort of the version of your story that's going to stick in our heads the most. Because ultimately that's what you want to happen. You want us to remember your initial pitch in and amongst the thousands that we get, so that we want to ask you more information, and that's what gets you to Longlist. So it's almost like you want that moment where, as we're reading through the applications, we sort of stop and lean forward because we're so intrigued by it. So I think sometimes the danger is that you want to communicate so much that it ends up just like bloating your synopsis, and it doesn't really stick with us. And also I think remembering that the reality is we have a lot of applications we have to read through. So making sure that what you're writing is very easy to digest and understand. If we have to repeatedly read through it over and over again to try and understand what you mean, you're just doing yourself a disservice. So I think like catchy, clear, memorable. I know that sounds obvious. I will see if there are some previous examples that I can share. I just don't want to make them up off the top of my head because it's been a while since I've read them now.
Amazing. Is it okay to raise a small amount of additional funding? For example, if filming needs to start slightly before the Netflix funds come through, can you raise a small amount of extra funding between now and then to cover filming costs?
No. So this fund, one of the stipulations is that Netflix is the sole funder of this film. So the expectation is the whole film is made in its entirety. Obviously, if you've been through like your own development process, maybe you've got funding through that. You know, there's versions of it that's okay, but generally the rule is that Netflix needs to be the sole funder.
If I'm a producer with an idea for a documentary, would it be better to attach a director, or would you consider a producer who would like to give it a go at directing as well? Or is it something that can be decided later in the process?
I would say if you want to direct, you should apply as the director, because ultimately they're the people who are going to be crafting and telling the story, and so we need to be confident. We need to understand what that would look like. But I think you can talk about your experience as a producer through that and how that, makes you potentially gives you some of the skill sets in order to direct. There might be a world where a discussion can be had, but I suppose it puts you at slight disadvantage because there's already a question mark over your application. So I think if you feel a strong desire to direct, then actually back yourself and go in with that as the application, and figure out whether you want to bring on another producer to work with you. I would say also, if you're a first-time director, maybe you do want another producer, even if you're super experienced, to try and take that workload off of you so you can focus on the directing.
Where can we find previous shorts on YouTube?
They are on Netflix's YouTube channel, which I can bring a link up so that we can share in the group. If you just give me 2 seconds. Really should have brought that up. Here we go. Let's see if I can put that in the chat.
Oh, I've noticed we have loads of questions in the chat as well, which I will go through. I'm going to finish the Q&A ones, then I'll go to the chat questions. I see there's loads there.
Yeah, so that link I just shared, I think I shared it in the right chat. That is a playlist of every single film that's been made in the fund since its inception. So yeah, I would definitely really recommend, if you have the time, try and watch as many of them as possible. I suppose another consideration is if what you're pitching feels too similar to a film we've already commissioned in the past, we're unlikely to commission something too similar again. So just bear that in mind.
Mm. Also, just a reminder, if you want to come up on stage and ask your question directly, put it in the chat and I'll get you on, or put your hand up and I can see it on my end. Next question. With the theme being change, the documentary meant to speak of current affairs or anything that can bring a positive change to an area a filmmaker is passionate about, such as youth violence, environmental issues, etc.?
Yeah, it's definitely not exclusively current affairs. Honestly, it's a very broad theme and it's kind of intentionally so you can interpret it however you want. So yeah, as long as you feel like it speaks to the theme, we're open to it.
Perfect. If the director is based in the UK, can the producer be outside the UK?
I believe technically yes. But then it would mean that the director would have to set up would have to have the limited company in the UK because the fund needs to run through the UK. And I suppose if the producer were outside of the UK, we would want to understand whether they're going to be able to provide you the support you need through the process. So it's not a no, but it's just think through the practicalities of, is that the best way to do it? And if you believe that it is, then it's worth in your creative statement maybe just putting in something that indicates what your thought process is for that.
Would we be allowed to produce and direct our film if we have experience doing both, or would this not be encouraged?
You are certainly allowed to, and we have had filmmakers in the past. Our instinct is, if you don't have to, don't, because it's just a lot of pressure and a lot of work for one person to do. Like I said, there's a lot of like paperwork and stuff that Netflix expects, and ultimately we want you to make the best film possible, and this is kind of your opportunity to showcase to Netflix what you can do. So yeah, it's not a no, and if you're really experiencing it, then we might feel more comfortable with that. But we've just, in our experience, even people who are quite established PDs working in television and stuff have still found actually the process quite intense to do it all by themselves.
You've said the theme has changed. How close does our doc need to meet this theme? Do you have any examples from last year's chosen projects?
So like I said, it's a pretty broad theme. We're pretty open to interpretation. I would say if you feel like the connection to the theme isn't as obvious for your film, then again, in the creative statement or your synopsis, just indicate how it connects to the theme. Make it as easy as possible for us to understand. Last year we had a different theme, which I'm trying to remember what it was now off the top of my head. It's a very good question. It'll come to me. I might have to come back to that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a completely different theme. But I mean, I think if you look at the films from previous years, they're all incredibly different and covering such a wide range of topics. So the theme is always open to interpretation. So as long as you can justify how it relates to it, ultimately we're open to it. And if the story is strong enough, I think you can always argue it.
Can the pitch documentary be a progression of a previously aired documentary or involve a contributor or subject that has already been broadcast?
So I'll take that in two parts. If it's the progression of a previously aired documentary, I guess you just have to make sure that that rights-wise or whoever you've made that film with, you're allowed to take the subject matter and run with it, as it were. But ultimately, it's its own standalone film, so as long as it feels like that, it's sort of fine. And if it's been a previous contributor that's previously been broadcast, that's not a problem. But I suppose in all of that, we would then have to understand, why do we want to make another film about this person? What is it that your film would be telling us that we haven't seen from the stuff that's already out there? So I think just bear that in mind when you're writing your creative statement.
Are there any stories to avoid, even if they're character driven? Any particular subjects that perhaps Netflix wants to focus on?
Um, there's nothing particularly to avoid. I think it's always a thing of like, can you do the story you're trying to tell justice in 8 to 12 minutes? So I think sometimes, especially maybe when it comes to some of the more current affairs or like political stories that get pitched, they're amazing topics, but it feels like sometimes the story is too big to tackle in a short amount of time. So I think it's just things like that. Um, and like I said, I think people in general are looking for films that are slightly more hopeful. So just bearing that in mind. But that's not to say also that the expectation is every film is super upbeat and optimistic. Again, I think if you look at the films from the previous year, we sort of quite intentionally have a range of different tones to the films. Some that are more serious, some that are more lighthearted. So yeah, I know it's quite a broad answer, but I think the main thing is like, if you're gonna tell a story that feels very big or very heavy or it's very, very sensitive, is it doable responsibly in the runtime that we have?
Oh, wait, did we have this one already?
Yes, we've had that one.
If part of the film will need to be shot abroad, but the director will be in the country already later in the year and can conduct a lean shoot, will that be detrimental to the application given the budget?
No, as long as it is doable in the budget, as it were. Like as long as you can pull it off, and you're convinced you can pull it off. That's the one thing I will say is that if you're going to shoot abroad, you really have to convince us that it's doable. It just means that we want to be extra reassured that if we're going to give you this opportunity, you really can deliver. So if that is the case, then indicate that in your creative statement. You don't have to go into all the details, but if it's very obvious from the synopsis that you need to shoot abroad, just indicate in your creative statement that you've thought through what those challenges are. And then if you get to Longlist, that's when we'll ask for your budget and we'll interrogate you much more on the details of that.
Hello, would the application be successful in the event where the producer applicant is a UK resident, but the filmmaker is European?
That's a good question. I think that if the director wasn't based in the UK, we would honestly be quite unlikely to fund it because the fund is to award UK and Irish filmmakers. So even if you were the applicant, it sort of feels like a little bit of a cheating the system kind of thing. The scheme is for UK and Irish applications. So if that were the case, we'd probably push back or ask you a little bit more about why that is. So yeah, that's the truth.
Do we need a limited company attached to the pitch then?
You don't have to initially pitch, but you just have to be aware that if you were to receive the funding, you would need to have a limited company in order to receive the funds. So some filmmakers will just have a producer that already has a limited company, which is fairly common practice, or some filmmakers will specifically set up a limited company for this fund, which is completely fine. But you just have to bear in mind you're responsible for all of the sort of filing and accounting that comes with that responsibility. But at the point of pitch, you don't need to worry about that at all. It's just something to be considering.
What's the ideal length you would want?
It's between 8 to 12 minutes.
Do the Netflix camera specs approved cameras apply, as this is primarily for Netflix YouTube?
Generally, Netflix specs do apply. Again, part of this is it's not just about giving the opportunity to make the film, but also give the opportunity to experience what it's like working with Netflix. Having said that, there is a little bit more flexibility because it is for YouTube and, and it's not going to broadcast. So there's a little bit of flexibility, and especially if there's something more interesting you want to do creatively, we're open to it. Yeah.
Are there tech requirements we should be aware of if successful? For example, loudness units when sound mixing, etc.
I'm going to be honest, I do not know the answer to that. But what I will say is if you get awarded the fund, you will go through a Netflix bootcamp where basically every department, legal, production, post, all of that will talk you through what the deliverables are, what the expectation is, and all of that sort of stuff. That's kind of the process of it. But I'm sorry, I'm not going to even begin to pretend like I know the answer to that.
Good answer. In recent discussions on projects, I was told that projects with history and archive as the component would not be suitable for Netflix, although I do see excellent historical work on Netflix. Is it just as much harder challenge to get across the line?
For this fund specific, I can't speak to the wider Netflix commissioning focus, but I think for this fund, we're very open. And I think maybe part of the reason we're much more open than, say, traditional commissioning briefs is because this is for YouTube. It's about backing filmmakers. So I think if you've got a strong historical film with strong archive, there's no problem at all, to be honest. Really, like one of our previous films is a very archive heavy film that was made last year. I think it's just, if it's going to be historical, why is it a story that's relevant to an audience now? If it's very archive heavy, have you got access to the archive? What kind of archive is available? It's just about exciting us at the prospect of revisiting, that particular story.
Will the producer production company that the director works with own the rights to the film?
I mean, how do I answer this? I don't want to say anything that isn't true.
Yeah.
The contract for the fund will be with the filmmaker and the production company, and Netflix doesn't retain the rights. But in terms of your agreement with your producer/production company, that's something that you guys need to have agreed, essentially. So if it's something that you're concerned about, we can also certainly have a discussion with you later down the line and figure out what the best way it might be. It might be that you need to draw up your own contract with your producing partner. But yeah, that's as much as I can say.
Are there any docs you or the team have watched recently that have a great story and felt fresh?
Ooh, good question. What films have I watched recently? I recently watched I think what's it called? Mr. Nobody versus Putin, I think is what it's called. Loved it. That's a feature-length film, but I thought that was such an interesting film because it took such a huge topic, the Ukraine war, but told it through such a small, unique lens. And I think that is something that we at the fund really, really love. Like, we're not, I don't want to dissuade people from tackling big topics, but it's about how do you bring us into that world and hook us in with like a strong character. And that film is a really, really good example of, an unlikely hero coming from the most unlikely of places, but that gave us an insight into something so much bigger, gave us an insight into what it's like to be under Putin's Russia, what it's like to be on the other side of that conflict, but feel like you're a pawn in everything that's going on. And it was just such a interesting way to look at that conflict that I think really, really stood out. So I would highly recommend going to watch that.
Yeah, I'll give it a watch. Can archive costs be part of the proposed budget?
Yes, and should be. So if you're doing an archive heavy film, or if there's any archive at all, the expectation is that the budget that you're given covers all aspects of making the film.
Okay, let's go through these chat questions. Is there any editorial control for the final piece from Netflix? How about rights and contracts?
So rights remain with the filmmakers. I'm not going to speak too much to the details of the contract just because I'm not the right person to ask. If you have very specific contract questions, then you can email me afterwards and I'm happy to find them out. Editorial, pretty broad. Netflix will give you notes throughout your post-production period, but it's ultimately about making the film that you want. And if you've gotten this far, we're basically bought into the idea of your film, so it's just about helping you execute it to the best of your ability.
Do you have to be a filmmaker, or can you be a lens-based artist producing a film, i.e. working with a filmmaker to make the film?
We're certainly open to maybe less traditional filmmaking partners, but what I will say is we are looking for people who want to work in documentary, for people where this opportunity to be meaningful for them kind of in the long term in terms of what they want to do next, getting them exposure to, you know, the heavy hitters in the doc space. So it's not to say no, but we are looking for people who are committed to working in documentary specifically.
What would make you not choose a submission?
I know I keep saying this, but a lot of the time it's just when people pitch a topic or a theme and there's no story, they haven't pitched us a story. It's probably the easiest no, where like interesting topic, they haven't pitched a film. Like that's probably a phrase we use a lot, which is like they haven't actually pitched a film. So I think really think through, like keep that in the front of your mind. It can be an amazing topic or amazing theme, but we need to understand what we'd literally be seeing on screen.
In the T's and C's, they say that you have to be a resident of the UK or Ireland. Does that mean physically living in the country and or simply having a passport from one of those countries?
That's a very good question. You definitely have to have the right to work here. I'm not 100% sure, but I would also say the expectation is that things like Bootcamp and events surrounding the fund, you would be expected to attend. And if you're not in the UK, then the fund wouldn't be covering you to attend. Does that make sense? So yeah, I think I'm not 100% sure on that, if I'm totally honest, but I can find out and I'll come back to you on that.
I think you kind of answered this, but can we have recorded interviews with potential people filmed already? Just researching a story at the moment, which would be relevant to this fund pitch.
Yeah, look, I think if you've just done like sort of initial research filming, that's fine. And, you know, and if that means that then if you get longlisted, you're able to submit a sizzle that shows some of the characters, that's amazing. It's just that we want the majority of production to be a result of this fund.
Also, a boring question, are VAT costs to be included in the 30K budget?
I believe it's 30K total excluding VAT, but I'm actually not 100% sure. So that is something I'll check and let you guys, I'll somehow communicate that to everyone.
Once your project is selected, what are the next steps? Do you know if there will be other opportunities of Netflix post this process?
It's pretty open. I mean, there's no, look, with things like this, there's no guarantee that doing this fund means that you get a job at Netflix or anything like that, but it is an opportunity for you to showcase to Netflix what you can do. And a lot of the people who've been through the fund with us now have relationships with Netflix who have gone on to work on projects for them, or who have, you know, come back and pitched other ideas to them. So there's no sort of fast and steady kind of path. It is a film fund, not a sort of career development program, but it is also an opportunity essentially to put your name on the map with Netflix.
What is the time frame between the long list, shortlist applications, and do you update at each stage? Also, is the feedback given at each stage?
So I'm going to bring up the timeline so I don't mess this up. So submissions close on the 12th of Feb. The long list will be contacted in April, and you'll be asked for more information to support your application. That includes a 2-minute video pitch, budget, any visual sort of creative stuff you want to show us. And then from the long list, everyone who was longlisted will then be informed by the 29th of May whether they are going to be shortlisted or not. The shortlisted teams will be asked to pitch for an industry panel in June, and then in July we announce which films have been selected. In terms of feedback, at the initial stage, no, it's just honestly not practical with the number of submissions we get. With the long-listed teams, we do tend to have a sort of initial chat about what additional information we want from them. And if you're not successful, we don't as standard just send out feedback, but we're open to having those conversations if people have specific questions. If you're shortlisted, we do appreciate if you've gone to that stage, you've put in a huge amount of work. So we try and give you feedback, and also try and maybe potentially connect you with other collaborators or people we might know that we think that your idea could be a good fit for. And, you know, I think the good thing, if you get to the shortlist point, you will have already met all of the Netflix people. So this is what we always say to the people who come to pitch days, like, even if you don't get selected, you've gotten what very few people get to, which is to sit in a room with all of the Netflix execs. So often that relationship continues even if they didn't receive the funding.
Also, as this is for British filmmakers, does the doc have to be a British story?
Not necessarily. There's no like rule about it having to be a British story. I think it's just about keeping in mind that the intended audience is the Netflix UK YouTube audience. So just bearing that in mind. Yeah, I think that's the only real steer on that one.
What if you have temporarily relocated and the documentary is based in the new resident country, but you are British?
Yeah, you can still pitch. Again, it's just whether we think it feels relevant to an audience and whether we think you can pull it off in the budget, and that you are going to be able to attend all of the various boot camps and things like that.
How much time do you have between learning you have been longlisted and needing to submit the 2-minute film, other supporting materials?
I believe we give you about, I think, 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. We've actually, I think we previously had it shorter, and I think we've just extended and given people more time. So we try and give people a generous amount of time to put everything together. I also say, like, we ask you to submit a 2-minute film, but we are not expecting necessarily a fully polished scissor reel. Like, some people do that and they put together a very like glitzy reel, but other people just talk on camera for 2 minutes, or some people just, you know, go down with their iPhone and film their contributors. So I would say, like, a glitzy sizzle reel is great, but we have done this long enough to know that we're not going to get bamboozled just by the polish of the film. So don't be too anxious about feeling like you need to pull off something incredible in a short amount of time. We're very aware that also at that point you're doing this just off your own back, so we don't expect not everyone has the same resources, right? So we are very aware of that. Yeah.
I know it's coming up to 7:30, so we're going to blitz through these last 3 questions, if that's okay.
Yep.
How long are the boot camps? Any extra sessions for the directors led by Netflix in preparation for the doc?
They're usually, it's been a bit of a mishmash. We've started to do a lot of them online just because it's more accessible for everyone. They tend to be like a couple of hours, an hour to a couple of hours per session. It sort of depends on what the topic is. Like, the legal boot camp does not go on for 2 hours, put it that way. No one wants to sit and listen to that for 2 hours. But, you know, there's also like a boot camp session with the creatives, you know, some of the execs and commissioners. There's people with the camera department, with post and all this stuff. So, but we tend to spread it out over multiple days so people aren't having to take time off work. So we tend to try and schedule them. That's why we're also doing a lot of them online now. We're trying to do them in the evenings so that people aren't having to lose out on any work in order to attend.
When would be expected to produce the doc? End of summer, autumn?
So you will go into production from July, and then final delivery will be in January.
And then how many people will be funded?
5.
Perfect. I'm sorry, I think that's all we have time for today. We've just got to the 7:30 mark, but thank you, Georgie, so much for talking to us today. This is
No
also going to
worries.
be recorded and be on Mighty Networks if anyone wants to watch this back. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, and what I'll also do, I'm just going to quickly drop an email address in the chat. So if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to drop us a message. It'll either be me or one of the other producers that pick it up.
Perfect. Yeah, we're doing loads more of these, so have a look out on the socials, on Mighty Networks. We'll have everyone that you can communicate with, and we'll have all the texts and messages that you can say to everyone, and I will share this on there soon. But yeah, again, if you guys want to stay around and have chats with each other, more than welcome to. But yeah, I'll let Georgie leave. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks everyone, and look forward to reading all your ideas.
Mm.